Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Can you hear that? The sound of rain against the window? The perfect blanket for a story designed to chill you to the bone, while paradoxically helping you relax. That's what we do here at Scary Stories for a Rainy Night. We find the strange comfort in fear. That wonderful feeling of being safely terrified. If that's a feeling you've been searching for, you're in the right place. Settle in, get comfortable, and if you enjoy what we do, please consider letting me know with a like and by subscribing for more dark tales. Your support is truly the light that keeps the shadows at bay. Just a quick note before we begin. I hear you about the ads, and I promise I'm working to make the experience as seamless and uninterrupted as possible moving forward. Now, let the rain fall and let the story begin. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and get a sudden ice-cold chill? People say it's a ghost. I wish it was a ghost. Ghosts don't learn your routine. It started with small stuff, the kind of stuff you'd blame on being tired or overworked. I work from home as a video editor, so my hours are weird. I'll be glued to my screen until 3 a.m., fueled by coffee, and then sleep till noon. My house, a small two-bedroom place at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, was my whole world, my sanctuary. The first thing I noticed was my coffee mug. I have this one specific mug. It's heavy, dark blue, and has a chip on the rim from when I dropped it years ago. It's my mug. One morning, I came downstairs, and it was already in the sink, rinsed out. I stared at it for a good minute. I was sure I'd left it on my desk upstairs. Okay, Mark, you were exhausted. You must have brought it down and forgot. I brushed it off. A few days later, it was the thermostat. I keep it locked at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, especially in the fall. I woke up shivering, and when I checked, it was set to 64. A single, deliberate change. Again, I told myself there had to be a reason. A power surge, maybe. A glitch in the system. The explanations got thinner and thinner each time. The real what the hell moment happened about 2 weeks in. I was getting ready to shower and noticed my bathroom mat was damp. Not just a little, but like someone had just stood on it after getting out of the shower. I live alone. I hadn't showered yet that day. I could feel my heart start to beat a little faster. I checked the shower. The glass door was dry, no water anywhere else. It made no sense. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical out. A leaky pipe under the floor? Condensation? That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a physical sensation, like a pressure in the air. Every creak of the old house made me jump. I found myself looking over my shoulder in my own empty hallway. I decided to do a full sweep. I checked every window lock, all secure. I checked the front and back doors, bolted. The garage door, down and locked. There was no way anyone could get in. I felt a little foolish, like a kid scared of the monster under the bed. To calm my nerves, I decided to install a cheap security camera I'd bought on Amazon months ago and never set up. I put it on the bookshelf in my living room, facing the front door and the bottom of the stairs. I just needed to prove to myself that it was all in my head.
I needed to see a long, boring recording of an empty, silent room. That night, I finally fell asleep, feeling a little more secure. I had no idea that I had just invited the monster to smile for the camera. I woke up the next morning feeling groggy but relieved. The house was quiet, the sun was shining, and my paranoia from the night before felt distant and silly. I made coffee in my blue mug, which was right where I left it, and sat down at my computer. I almost forgot about the camera until I saw the app icon on my phone. Might as well check it, I thought. The app showed me a timeline of the night, with little markers for when it detected motion. There was one marker at 8 p.m. when I walked downstairs to get water, another one at 11 p.m. when I went to bed. Then there was a third marker at 3:17 a.m. My blood went cold. I tapped on it. The video loaded. At first, it was just my dark living room, illuminated only by the pale moonlight coming through the windows. The clock on my cable box glowed. 3:17:04. I held my breath. Nothing happened. 3:17:15. Still nothing. Must have been a moth, I thought, about to close the app. And then I saw it. From the bottom left of the frame, from the direction of my kitchen, a figure walked into view. It moved without a sound. It was a man, tall and thin. He was wearing clothes that I didn't recognize, dark jeans and a plain gray hoodie. He walked to the center of the room and just stood there. For a full minute, he just stood in the middle of my living room, perfectly still. My own breathing was loud in my ears as I watched, my phone shaking in my hand. Then he slowly turned his head towards the bookshelf. He was looking directly at the camera. I couldn't see his face. It was hidden in the shadow of his hood. But I just knew he was looking right at the lens. He knew it was there. He raised a hand, not to wave, but just held it up for a moment before letting it fall back to his side. It wasn't a threat, it was an acknowledgement. I see you, you see me. The worst part was what he did next. He walked over to the small table where I keep my keys and wallet. He didn't take them. He picked up a framed photo of me and my sister from a vacation we took years ago. He held it for a moment, tilting it in the moonlight. Then he set it back down, not where it was, but perfectly centered on the table. A tiny, deliberate change, an act of ownership. Then he walked silently back towards the kitchen and out of frame. The video ended. I felt like I was going to throw up. He was in my house. While I was sleeping just one floor above him, he was in my house. I called the police. 2 officers came, a man and a woman. They were professional, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They found no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. They watched the video and agreed it was creepy, but they said, without a clear shot of his face or any actual crime committed, there's not much we can do. He could be a friend who has a key, a sleepwalker. I told them I live alone and nobody has a key. They suggested I change the locks, which felt like the most useless advice I'd ever heard. As they left, I felt a new kind of terror, the terror of being completely and utterly on my own with this. Changing the locks was the first thing I did. I paid a locksmith a ridiculous amount of money for new deadbolts on every door. I felt a sliver of control return. That feeling lasted exactly 1 day. I came home from a rare trip to the grocery store to find the front door locked just as I'd left it. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew he'd been there. The air was different, colder. I walked into the kitchen and saw it. On the kitchen table, in the very center, was a single, perfect red apple. I hadn't bought any apples. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a message, your new locks don't matter. I can still get in whenever I want. How was he doing it? I searched the house again, this time like a madman, looking for a hidden door, a loose window, anything. I found nothing. The game escalated. He stopped trying to be subtle. It was like now that I knew, he wanted me to know. He wanted me to be afraid. He started leaving things, not stealing, but leaving. One morning I found a man's silver watch on my nightstand. It wasn't mine. It was old, the leather strap worn down. A few days later, I opened my sock drawer and found a single folded white handkerchief, perfectly ironed. He was leaving pieces of himself in my house, or maybe pieces of his other victims. The psychological toll was devastating. I stopped sleeping. How could I? Every sound was him. I'd sit in the dark in my bedroom, clutching a baseball bat, just listening. I lost weight. I stopped answering calls from friends and family. How could I explain this? They'd think I was losing my mind. And honestly, sometimes I thought so too. I started talking to myself, triple-checking rooms I knew were empty. My sanctuary had become my prison, and I was sharing it with a ghost who was very, very real. The camera in the living room captured nothing. He was smart. He knew its field of view. He was coming in from somewhere else, staying in the blind spots. The ultimate violation came a week after the apple. I had finally managed to drift into a light, uneasy sleep. I had a nightmare that I was drowning, and I woke up gasping for air. The room was pitch black. I lay there, my heart pounding, trying to calm down. And then I heard it. From the other side of my bedroom, a soft, slow inhale, and then an exhale. Someone was in the room with me, breathing in the dark. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My body was completely paralyzed with a fear so pure it was almost electric. The sound came again, a slow, steady breath in the corner of the room where the shadows were deepest. He was watching me sleep. How long had he been there? Minutes? Hours? Had he been doing this every night? My mind screamed, "Run! Get out! Now!" But my body wouldn't obey. The baseball bat was leaning against the wall just inches from my bed, but it felt 1,000,000 miles away. I thought if I moved, if I made a sound, he would lunge. So I lay there, pretending to be asleep for what felt like an eternity. Each breath he took was a countdown. Finally, after an agonizing stretch of silence, I heard the faintest whisper of fabric, and then the almost inaudible click of my bedroom door closing. He was gone. The second I heard that click, I flew out of bed. I didn't grab the bat. I didn't grab my phone. I just ran. I sprinted out of the house, barefoot and in my pajamas, into the cold night. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away, standing under a streetlight, hyperventilating. I called the police again, this time from a neighbor's phone. They came, they cleared the house, they found nothing. Of course they found nothing. He was gone, but this time they found how he was getting in. In the back of my bedroom closet, behind a rack of old coats, a section of the drywall had been expertly cut out. It was a hidden panel that led directly into the attic crawl space. From the attic, he could access the walls of the house. He hadn't been breaking in. He had been living in my house, in the walls, like a termite. The police found a small, miserable nest he'd made in the attic. A sleeping bag, empty water bottles, wrappers from granola bars, and a small, horrifying collection of my things. A sock, a toothbrush, a few strands of my hair taped to a piece of cardboard, and photos, dozens of photos of me, sleeping. They caught him a week later. His name was Gerald. He was an electrician who had worked on the house for the previous owners years ago. That's when he built his little secret door. He had done this before. The watch, the handkerchief, they belonged to the people who lived here before me, a family with 2 kids. They had moved out abruptly, telling neighbors they were suddenly uncomfortable in the house. Gerald confessed everything. He told the police he just liked to be a part of the family, to watch them, to live their lives with them from the shadows. He wasn't violent, he claimed. He just liked to be close. I moved out. I sold the house for a huge loss. I didn't care. I live in a high-rise apartment now, with a doorman and security cameras on every floor. But I still don't feel safe. Sometimes, late at night, when it's quiet, I'll catch a glimpse of a reflection in my dark TV screen or a window. A tall, thin man standing just behind me. It's just a trick of the light, I know, but I always have to turn around and check. Your home is your sanctuary, the one place in the world you're supposed to be safe. But locks only keep out honest people. The real monsters don't need a key. They find the cracks you never knew existed, and they crawl right inside. Never, ever ignore your gut feeling. That sense of being watched, that feeling that something is out of place, is not paranoia. It's an alarm, and you need to listen to it before the person watching you decides they want to get closer.
Every old apartment building has its own language. The groan of pipes, the sigh of the floorboards. I learned to live with that. What I couldn't live with was when the buildings started whispering my name. I moved into the Creston building for 2 reasons. It was cheap, and it had character. Character is just a nice word for old. It was a 6-story pre-war building with a grumpy old super, drafty windows, and a beautiful but unsettlingly slow elevator. My apartment, 4B,
was at the end of a long hallway. Its best feature was its price. Its worst feature, I would soon learn, was the large, ornate metal vents in every room. They were original to the building, works of cast-iron art that, according to the super, hadn't been functional for 50 years. The first week was normal. I unpacked, got used to the creaks and groans, and learned which of my neighbors had a dog that barked. But then I started hearing the whispers. It was only at night, when the city outside was quiet, a faint, constant muttering. At first, I was sure it was my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who probably left her TV on. But the sound wasn't clear like a TV. It was layered, like several people talking at once, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was coming from the vents. Then small things started to go missing from my kitchen. Not valuables, which would have made sense. It was food. I'd buy a loaf of bread on Monday, and by Tuesday a few slices would be gone from the middle of the loaf. A carton of milk would feel lighter than it should, and apple would vanish from the fruit bowl. I chalked it up to my own stress. I'd just started a new job, was living in a new city. I was probably just forgetful, eating things without realizing it. The moment I knew something was wrong, truly wrong, was on a Saturday. I was cleaning the apartment, music blasting through my headphones. I took them off to answer a phone call, and in the sudden silence, I heard it clearly, a child's laugh. It was quick and sharp, and it came directly from the vent in my living room floor. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. There were no children on my floor. I ran to the vent and pressed my ear against the cold metal grill. The laughing was gone, replaced by that familiar, low whispering. It wasn't my imagination, and it wasn't coming from another apartment. It was coming from inside the walls. My fear quickly turned into a kind of obsessive investigation. I started documenting everything. I recorded hours of audio on my phone, holding it up to the vents. When I played it back with the volume turned all the way up, I could hear them. Muffled words, overlapping sentences, none of it in a language I could understand. And underneath it all, a constant scratching, shuffling sound. I went to the building superintendent, Mr. Henderson. He was a gaunt, skeletal man who always seemed annoyed. When I told him about the noises and the missing food, he didn't even look up from his newspaper. "It's an old building, miss. Pipes talk. You got mice." "It's not mice," I insisted. "It sounds like people, and I heard a kid laugh." His eyes finally flicked up to meet mine. There was no sympathy in them, only a cold, flat warning. "You're on the 4th floor. The building's bones are thinnest there. Stay away from the vents and keep your pantry locked. Some things in this place are best left alone." He wasn't helping me. He was warning me. The casual way he said it terrified me more than the whispers themselves. He knew. I took his advice and started locking my pantry at night. The food stopped disappearing, but something else started. They began leaving me things. I woke up one morning to find a small, crudely carved wooden bird on my kitchen counter. It was made from what looked like a splinter of wood, but it was detailed in a strange, almost primitive way. A few days later, I found a small pile of shiny pebbles arranged in a perfect circle by my front door. These weren't threats. They felt like trades, offerings. They had been taking my food, and now that I had cut off their supply, they were trying to barter. The realization was horrifying. I wasn't dealing with a ghost or a broken pipe. I was dealing with something alive, a hidden community living in the arteries of the building, with its own rules, its own language, and its own strange currency of rocks and wood carvings. And they were trying to communicate with me.
Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes I'd hear a scratching sound, not from the vents, but from the other side of the drywall in my bedroom, right behind my headboard. I started sleeping on the couch. My one-bedroom apartment had shrunk to a single room. The rest of the space felt like it belonged to them. The breaking point came one night when I dropped my keys. They slid across the hardwood floor and disappeared under the built-in closet in the hallway. Annoyed, I got a flashlight and pried up the loose piece of plywood that served the closet's floor. I expected to see concrete and dust. What I saw instead was darkness, a deep, black shaft. It was an old dumbwaiter, long since sealed over and forgotten. As my eyes adjusted, I saw something that made my breath catch in my throat. Far below, at the bottom of the shaft, there was a faint, flickering light. A candle? A lantern? My curiosity overrode my fear. I grabbed my phone, turned on the video recorder, and tied it to a piece of string. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I lowered it slowly into the darkness, into the guts of the building. The phone swung wildly at first, then stabilized. The flickering light came into focus. The video feed on my screen showed a scene from a nightmare. The shaft opened into a cavernous space in the building's sub-basement. A small makeshift camp was illuminated by a few dim lanterns. I saw people. At least, I think they were people. They were impossibly thin and pale, their bodies contorted from living in cramped spaces. They were dressed in what looked like rags. One of them was slowly stirring a pot over a small flame. Another was carving another one of those little wooden birds. They were the source of the whispers. They had been living down there in the dark for God knows how long, using the vent system and dumbwaiters to move through the building like blood through veins. Then, one of them, a small figure that could have been a child, looked up. Its eyes were huge and black in its pale face. It didn't scream. It just pointed, a long, skinny finger, pointing right at me. I yanked the phone back up so fast the string snapped. I didn't care. I slammed the closet floor back down and scrambled away from it, my back hitting the opposite wall. They saw me. They knew I knew. The whispers stopped, all of them, at once. The entire building fell into a dead, terrifying silence. It was the loudest silence I had ever heard. I knew what it meant. The game was over. I wasn't a curiosity anymore. I was a threat. I had to get out. I didn't pack. I just grabbed my purse and my keys and bolted for the front door. As my hand touched the doorknob, I heard a loud metallic bang from the living room. I whipped my head around to see the cast iron vent cover on the floor,
bulging outwards, the screws straining against the metal. Another bang, this time from the bedroom. They were coming out. They were coming for me. I fumbled with the 3 locks on my door, my fingers clumsy with panic. Pop! One of the screws from the vent cover shot across the room and hit the wall. Pop! Pop! Another 2 followed. The metal grill was now bent into a convex semicircle. I got the final lock undone and threw the door open. I didn't look back. I sprinted down the hallway, not daring to wait for the elevator. As I hit the stairwell, I could hear my apartment door being forced open behind me. But worse, I heard other doors creaking open on my floor. Mrs. Gable's door, the apartment across the hall. I heard shuffling feet. They weren't just in the walls. They were in the apartments. Had they gotten the other tenants, or were the other tenants part of it? I flew down the 4 flights of stairs and burst out into the cold night air of the city, gasping for breath. I ran and didn't look back. I never went back. I left my entire life in that apartment. A few months later, out of a morbid curiosity, I looked up the Creston online. I found a small news article. There had been a fire. The building was condemned. The article mentioned that firefighters were baffled by the building's internal structure, which was, quote, a dangerous and unexplainable honeycomb of crawl spaces. They officially listed the cause as faulty wiring. The article ended with one strange sentence. No residents were reported injured or missing. We live our lives in boxes, thinking the walls keep us safe, that they separate us from the world. But some walls aren't barriers. They're just the membrane between our world and another one. Always listen to the sounds a place makes. Most of the time, it's just the building settling, but sometimes it's the inhabitants reminding you that you're the one who's just visiting. The weirdest job interview I ever had ended with a single strange rule. If you see a man in the halls at night, don't talk to him. He's just checking on the house. I thought they were joking. They weren't. I was a broke college student. That's the only reason I took the job. The ad was for an overnight caregiver for an elderly woman. The pay was insane, almost triple the normal rate. The house was in one of those super wealthy gated communities where all the houses look like modern art museums and are spaced so far apart you couldn't hear your neighbor scream if you tried. I was interviewed by the woman's son and his wife, David and Claire. They were polished, perfect, and had the kind of smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They explained that their mother, Mrs. Albright, had severe dementia. My job was simple. Just be there from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Make sure she doesn't wander. Give her a glass of water if she wakes up. Mostly, she just slept. It's the easiest money you'll ever make, David said. The house was sterile. All white walls, minimalist furniture, and giant glass windows that looked out into the pitch-black woods. It was so quiet, you could hear the electricity humming in the walls. As they were showing me out, Claire turned to me and added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and one more thing. My mother sometimes gets confused and thinks she sees my late father walking around. We've also hired a private night watchman for the property. He does silent walkthroughs. If you happen to see a man in the house at night, please don't engage with him. He's very serious about his job and prefers not to be disturbed. He's just checking things." I nodded, though a little alarm bell went off in my head. A security guard inside the house? It was weird, but they were rich. Rich people do weird things. I needed the money, so I ignored the bell. My first night was deeply unsettling. The silence of that house was a living thing. Every creak felt like a footstep. Mrs. Albright was fast asleep in her downstairs bedroom, her breathing soft and even. I spent most of the night on the huge white sofa in the living room, trying to read a book, but my eyes kept darting towards the long dark hallway that connected the living area to the bedrooms. Around 2 a.m., I got up for a glass of water, and as I stood in the stark white kitchen, the motion sensor light at the far end of the hall clicked on, flooding it with a soft glow. And that's when I saw him, a tall, slender man, standing perfectly still, his back to me. He was just a silhouette. Before I could even process what I was seeing, he turned a corner, and the light clicked off, plunging the hallway back into absolute darkness. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to breathe. It's just the security guard. He's just checking things. But he hadn't made a sound, not a single footstep on the hardwood floor. It felt wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong.
The nightly visits became a part of the routine. I never saw him up close. It was always a glimpse, a shadow passing a doorway, a brief reflection in the massive glass wall of the living room as he walked by outside, a figure standing at the top of the stairs for a few seconds before retreating. He never acted like a security guard. He never carried a flashlight, never checked a door or a window. He just walked. He moved with an unnerving grace and a silence that was supernatural. The security guard explanation was wearing thin, replaced by a growing, gnawing dread. I felt like a zoo animal, and he was the quiet observer on the other side of the glass. The third night, Mrs. Albright woke up. She didn't seem confused. In fact, for a moment, her eyes were clearer than I'd ever seen them. She gripped my wrist with surprising strength, her knuckles white. "He's here," she whispered, her voice raspy. "The cold man. He's waiting for the girl." Before I could ask who the girl was, her eyes clouded over again, and she started muttering about her childhood dog. But her words echoed in my head. The cold man. My fear solidified into pure terror a week into the job. I was on the sofa, pretending to watch a movie. The house was silent. I had that prickly, horrible feeling of being stared at. I slowly turned my head towards the dining room, and there he was. He was standing behind one of the support pillars, half hidden in the shadows. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his head and shoulders. My entire body went rigid. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to scream, to do something. But the rule echoed in my mind. Don't engage with him. Was this a test? I turned my head back to the television, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. I stared blankly at the screen, not breathing, for what felt like an hour. When I finally got the courage to look again, he was gone. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of the kitchen, clutching a chef's knife, until the sun came up. I had to know what I was dealing with. A ghost?
A man. Something else. The lie about him being a security guard was so blatant it felt like an insult. I started searching. In the sterile home office, I found what I was looking for. A family photo album. I flipped through the pages of David and Claire's perfect life until I got to the older pictures. There she was, a younger Mrs. Albright, standing next to her husband, Mr. Albright. He was tall. He was slender. He had the exact same build as the man in the halls. My blood ran cold. The man in the photo had been dead for over a decade. So he was a ghost. That had to be it. It was terrifying, but somehow a ghost felt manageable. Ghosts have rules. They're tied to a place. They're not a physical threat. I decided then that I had to break their one rule. I couldn't spend another night in that house, cowering in fear. The next night, I was ready. I sat on the sofa, waiting. At 1:47 a.m., as always, the hallway light clicked on. There he was, at the far end of the hall, his back to me. This was my chance. "Hello," my voice came out as a shaky whisper. "Can I help you?" The figure froze. For a long, silent moment, it didn't move. I thought maybe he hadn't heard me. Then, with a slowness that felt deeply unnatural, he turned, not his whole body, just his head. It rotated on his neck until he was facing me. And he took one step forward, out of the deepest shadows, and into the soft glow of the light. My relief at the thought of it being a ghost evaporated into a new, more profound horror. It wasn't Mr. Albright. The face was that of a total stranger. It was pale, gaunt, and utterly devoid of emotion. His eyes were dark voids, and they were locked on me. He wasn't angry. He wasn't anything. He was just empty. He looked at me for 10 solid seconds, a predator studying its prey. Then, without a word, he turned and walked silently into the master bedroom, the one room David and Claire had told me was off limits. The next morning, David arrived to relieve me. He was smiling his usual plastic smile. "Good night?" he asked. "I saw him," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "I spoke to him." David's smile didn't just disappear. It was like it was surgically removed from his face. His expression turned to one of cold, hard anger. "What was the rule, Sarah? The only rule we gave you." "Who is he?" I demanded. "You're fired," he said flatly, opening the front door for me. As I walked past him, he leaned in and whispered, "It's a shame. He was starting to get used to you." I was shaken for weeks, but also relieved. I tried to tell myself it was over, but I couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Albright, about that cold, empty house, about the man who walked its halls. A week later, I saw the ad again on the same job site. Overnight caregiver needed urgently. Excellent pay. They were already looking for my replacement. A sick feeling washed over me. I couldn't let another person walk into that situation blindly. But I couldn't go to the police. What would I say? There's a creepy man walking around a house and the owners are okay with it? They'd think I was crazy. So I did the only thing I could think of. I used a friend's phone and called the number, pretending to be a new applicant. Claire answered, her voice as smooth and cold as ever. I asked the standard questions about duties and pay. Then I asked the question that had been haunting me. "I just have one final question," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a beautiful home, but it's very isolated. Is there any kind of security on site?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought she might hang up. Then she spoke, and her voice was different. The fake warmth was gone, replaced with a chilling honesty. "There is a presence in the house, a guardian. It watches over the family. It ensures Mother is never alone." My throat dried. "A guardian? It requires very little. A warm house, a quiet space, and companionship. It doesn't like to be alone. It gets agitated when it's alone." The final horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The astronomical pay, the single bizarre rule, David's final words to me. They hadn't hired me to be a caregiver for Mrs. Albright. Mrs. Albright was just the anchor that kept the thing there. I was the real job. My presence, my fear, my quiet companionship, that was the payment. I wasn't an employee. I was an offering. I was there to keep the guardian company so it wouldn't get agitated. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. I thought about the next girl who would take that job, who would be told the lie about the quiet watchman, and who would sit on that white sofa in the dead of night, feeling a pair of empty eyes watching her from the shadows. And she would have no idea that she wasn't there to watch over an old woman. She was there to be the plaything for the man in the halls. Some of the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones that break down your door. They're the ones that are invited in, given a key, and made a part of the family. Always question the rules that don't make sense. Sometimes they're not there for your safety. They're there to keep you from seeing the bars of your own cage.